Okay, so today we were diving into uh, JJRA Earth,
Hmm.
and wow, their vision is really something
Well,
else.
ambitious.
Yeah.
That's one word for it. I mean, we're talking like sustainable cities, AI that's kind of mind-bending. They're even planning a global arts festival.
Mm.
Just a lot to unpack here.
Someone has been busy, that's for sure. Yeah. Thankfully, I didn't have to read through all of this myself. So to give us a hand, we have
Yeah, I'm happy to be here to try to make sense of it all, or at least try to.
yeah, because this is a lot.
Yeah.
So all right, let's start unpacking this. From sand to civilization. That's their first big idea, turning North Stradbroke Island, which is in Australia, into this like tech utopia. And get this, they want to build everything using only local materials,
Specifically sand.
specifically sand.
Yeah. The documents highlight that the island's sand is, well, it's special. It's rich in elements like zircon and monazite, and those aren't just for, building sandcastles on the beach. They're really important for high-tech manufacturing. We're talking like solar panels, even components for spacecraft.
Hold on, so we're talking spaceships made of sand. How does that even work?
Right. It sounds kind of crazy at first, but they lay out a really surprisingly detailed plan for how they would do it. They talk about like refining those raw elements from the sand, and they have this whole step-by-step manufacturing process for advanced tech using those materials. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, the logistics of all of that are kind of mind-boggling. What stood out to you about how they plan to manage that level of complexity?
That's where their focus on artificial intelligence really comes in. These documents are just filled with all these proposals for AI assistants, or as they call them, auras of intelligence.
Right, the aura of intelligence. Yeah. Is that basically their fancy term for like a digital twin of your mind or
It's, well, yeah, more than just a replica. They're describing something that grows alongside you, learning your values and helping you make decisions as
yeah.
it learns. And it's not just about like personal growth or whatever. There are even potential uses for this in like healthcare. They specifically talk about using these auras in dementia care, where it could help individuals through their daily routines and stuff.
Okay. Yeah, now that you mention it, yeah, they did include like projections for how this kind of tech could be used in healthcare. It's amazing, but it also kind of makes you wonder about the ethics of basically creating like digital versions of ourselves, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. For sure. And you're right to be asking that. I mean, to their credit, the source material, it does acknowledge that those ethical considerations are really important.
Yeah.
They propose things like using biosignature monitoring to guarantee authenticity, along with a really big emphasis on user consent and data privacy, which I think is really important with something like this.
Yeah. It's a lot to consider. Okay, so we've got these like potential like sandcastle cities of the future. We've got digital versions of ourselves running around. What else is on this like JAJRI Earth to-do list?
Well, another key theme that emerges from these documents is community engagement. They have this whole plan to like revamp democracy to make it more interactive and engaging for people. They call it gamified democracy.
Gamified democracy. Okay, so are we talking like earning badges for voting or something? What does that even look like in practice?
That's what's so fascinating. They're a bit uh, vague on the specifics, but the goal seems to be to encourage participation by making, well, they want to make politics less about arguing and more about, working together to actually solve problems.
Okay, so it seems like so far JJR Earth isn't just interested in like just tech advancements. They're aiming for like this total societal transformation.
Yeah, precisely. And as if all that wasn't enough, they're also planning this massive global arts and music festival, like a new Live Aid. They're calling it Live Aid 2025. The idea is to, kind of unite the world through shared experiences, celebrating how interconnected we all are.
Okay, a global festival sounds amazing, but I mean, is there any downside or like challenges highlighted in this material? Like is this all just too good to be true?
Well, you're right to be a little cautious. One concern that they raise is the potential environmental impact of all of this.
Yeah.
It's a lot of building, a lot of tech, right? So how can a project of this scale truly be sustainable?
Right, that is the big question, isn't it? How to balance this like amazing progress with also protecting the planet at the same time.
Exactly. And to their credit, the documents, they really do stress how crucial it is to use those locally sourced materials responsibly to minimize the ecological footprint of, all of this new tech. But there's no doubt it's going to be a difficult balance to strike for sure.
And what about these digital auras? Like could someone, I don't know, like hijack them or use them for something bad? I mean, is that addressed at all?
Oh, yeah. That's another very valid concern. And they actually dedicate a lot of space to talking about potential challenges like that. Data security,
Yeah.
preventing unauthorized access, even, yeah, the potential for auras being used for ill intent. They do propose safeguards, but it's definitely a conversation that needs careful consideration as this moves forward for sure.
It seems like, yeah, for every amazing opportunity here, there's an equally big question about the ethics involved, right?
That's the double-edged sword of any technological revelation here.
Right.
But it is encouraging that JJRA Earth, that they at least seem to be aware of that based on everything they put together here.
Okay, so let's recap for a sec. So we've got these sustainable cities, AI companions, a complete overhaul of democracy, and a global festival. And this is all like in the works, apparently, according to them. Before we jump into the specifics of how they actually plan to pull all of this off, I'm curious, what has stood out to you the most about all of this so far?
Honestly, it's the sheer interconnectedness of it all. They aren't treating these as, separate projects, but as different parts of like a single unified vision for the future. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And the level of detail in these documents, it's incredible. This isn't some like vague wish list or anything. They've clearly put an immense amount of thought into this.
I'm with you. It's almost like reading like a science fiction novel, but one that's like grounded in actual research and planning, which is kind of wow. Speaking of which, you mentioned earlier that they're using these ideas to actually like write stories and stuff.
Right. There's this one document about how they're creating narratives and even running simulations to test these concepts and explore how they might play out in the real world, which I think is a pretty cool approach. It's like they're trying to anticipate the social and ethical implications of their ideas before just, building the tech blindly and hoping for the best, which I can appreciate.
Simulations, I mean that makes sense in theory, but how do you simulate something as complex as, like an entirely new way of life?
That's where it gets really interesting. They're using something called gene agents. It's basically it's like AI-powered characters who live within this simulated world that they've created.
Hold on, so they're creating a virtual world populated by AI to see if their ideas would actually work in the real world?
Exactly. And it's not even about like perfectly predicting the future. It's more about like exploring possibilities and spotting potential problems before they happen.
Hmm.
And ultimately making smarter choices about how to build that better future that they keep talking about.
Okay, this is blowing my mind a little bit. JJR Earth is seriously thinking outside the box here, or maybe they've like invented a whole new box altogether.
That's a great way to put it. A new framework for like even imagining what the future could be.
Yeah.
One that isn't, held back by our current limitations and ways of thinking.
We've got AI simulations, space exploration, a whole lot more to cover. So should we dive into some more of these details? I feel like we're just getting started.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's get into the specifics of how they're actually planning on making all this happen. So we've talked about their vision, their big grand vision, but how do they actually plan to fund something this massive? I mean, it just seems like it would take an incredible amount of resources to even get this off the ground.
You're reading my mind. Let's get into the specifics, the actual plans. They've outlined some pretty ambitious goals, starting with actually building these sustainable cities that they keep talking about. So, like, where do they even begin with something like that?
Right. Yeah. It's one thing to have blueprints. It's another to actually like break ground and start building. But their plans for North Stradbroke Island, they're actually surprisingly detailed. They're taking a phased approach. And the first stage focuses on like establishing those renewable energy sources that we talked about earlier. They specifically mentioned solar, wind, even harnessing wave power, which is interesting.
So, a city entirely powered by nature. That sounds like something out of a futuristic novel. What are they planning to build all of this out of more sand?
Well, they are really big proponents of using, local resources whenever possible. The documents mention 3D printing as like a key construction method. And yeah, they were suggesting using, that locally sourced sand to create the actual building components.
Hold on, 3D printed houses, but made of sand. I mean, how strong can those actually be?
Yeah, it's not just a matter of like piling up sand and hoping for the best.
Yeah.
The documents actually get into some pretty fascinating material science. They're talking about how they can process that sand to create incredibly durable building materials. And they're even looking at like incorporating natural elements into the actual city design, like almost blurring the lines between the built environment and nature, which I think is a cool concept.
Okay, I have to admit, yeah, picturing like a futuristic city that's like built in harmony with nature, that's pretty cool. But
Yeah.
they're not stopping at just, physical buildings, are they? There was something in these plans about a virtual version of the city as well.
You're remembering their concept of what they call a mixed reality city. So they want to create this digital twin of the physical city, but in a metaverse environment. So imagine a place where you could like seamlessly transition between the physical and digital realms, like attending meetings,
Yeah.
socializing, even like participating in city governance, all within this one interconnected space.
So residents could essentially like live in both worlds simultaneously. Okay, that's a pretty wild concept. It makes me wonder about the social implications of something like that. Like, would people ever want to leave their virtual utopia? Would they?
That's one of the big questions they're trying to address through those gene agent simulations that we talked about earlier, I think. By creating this virtual replica of the city, they can run all sorts of tests and scenarios to see like how these concepts might actually play out with real people, even if they're simulated people.
It's like they're using technology to not just build a city, but to build this whole new way of life, which is kind of amazing.
Exactly. And they're not just focusing on the technological aspects either. They also recognize the importance of, human connection, community building. Remember their idea for gamified democracy. It's all part of this larger goal of getting people more engaged, both in their local communities, but then also on a global scale.
Okay, let's circle back to that global arts festival that they mentioned, Live Aid 2025. I'm still trying to wrap my head around like how it all fits in with the rest of their vision.
That's a great point. It's not just about like throwing a giant concert, right? They see it as this powerful tool for bringing people together and really inspiring them to take action on these global issues that we keep bumping up against.
So more than just a celebration, it's also this like call to action.
Exactly. They're talking about using like cutting edge technology to create this immersive, like multi-sensory experience. So imagine like attending a concert, but instead of just watching it on a screen, you're experiencing it in real time through like augmented reality or even holographic projections.
It sounds like they're pulling out all the stops to make this a truly unforgettable event. But like even with all the technology and everything, what are they hoping to actually achieve on a deeper level with this festival?
One of the key themes that kind of emerges from all of this is this idea of interconnectedness, like really breaking down barriers and fostering a sense of global unity. They envision Live Aid 2025 as this platform to showcase solutions to those pressing global challenges that we talked about, from climate change to social inequality. They want to use this as a way to get people talking about solutions.
So it's about using art and technology as a bridge to connect people around shared values and aspirations. It's an interesting strategy for sure, and it seems to tie back to their concept of auras as well, right?
Absolutely. They envision the festival as an opportunity for people to actually like experience these different facets of their auras and not just the aura of intelligence that we talked about earlier, but they're introducing concepts like the aura of love and the aura of abundance as well.
Okay, I have to ask, what exactly do they mean by like an aura of love or an aura of abundance? Those sound pretty abstract even for them.
Yeah, they're definitely leaving some of those details open to interpretation, but the general idea seems to be about like amplifying positive emotions and fostering this sense of shared prosperity. Like imagine a world where technology could actually help us to connect more deeply with ourselves and with each other to really tap into our full potential, both individually and collectively.
It's a compelling vision, and it's really interesting how they're weaving together all of these different concepts. Technology, spirituality, social change. It's a lot. But I have to admit, I'm also feeling a bit skeptical. I don't know about you.
It's good to be skeptical.
Yeah.
Dreaming big is important, but it's also crucial to ground those dreams in reality.
Hmm.
And that's where we need to talk about some of the potential challenges and criticisms of J.J. Earth's plans, because there are some.
Okay, yeah, let's shift gears a bit then and dive into those challenges. What are some of the potential roadblocks they might encounter? What are they worried about? All right, so we've explored this ambitious, huge vision of JJR Earth, but like every grand project, every grand idea, it's going to come with its own set of potential hurdles and roadblocks. So
Yeah.
what are some of the challenges that they've identified in these documents? What are they worried about?
Well, one challenge that kind of jumps out right away, and this is something that's actually happening right now, is they're really concerned about something called solar maximum 25.
Right, right. Yeah, we touched on that a little bit earlier. It's about the sun like being more active and potentially like messing with our tech and stuff, right?
Exactly, yeah. Think, sunspots, solar flares, all that stuff. And according to their research, this upcoming solar maximum, it's predicted to be, well, pretty intense. They're specifically worried about the potential for like widespread electromagnetic interference here on Earth.
Okay, so imagine the scenario. All this incredible technology that they're proposing that they're really excited about gets like wiped out by a solar storm. That's a huge risk.
It's definitely a point of concern. And to their credit, they dedicate a whole section to discussing like the need for resilient infrastructure, like backup systems, alternative communication methods, that don't rely on vulnerable satellites and things like that. It's a good reminder that, no matter how like technologically advanced we become, we're still kind of the mercy of nature's power.
Yeah, that's a humbling thought for sure. But it seems like instead of just like worrying about it, they're actually trying to find like ways to work with it or
Yeah.
even use it to their advantage, which is kind of a cool approach, I guess.
Absolutely. They've even like explored the idea of harnessing solar energy during these periods of like heightened solar activities. Essentially, like turning a potential threat into a source of power, which I think is a pretty cool approach.
Okay, so we've got potential space weather to contend with. What other like concerns did they bring up? What else are they thinking about?
Well, one that comes up again and again is the quantum scalability. So, like, can they realistically take these ambitious ideas and actually make them work on a global level? Because it's a massive undertaking to say the least.
Right, because it's one thing to like, pilot a sustainable city on the smaller scale, like they're talking about doing, but it's a completely different thing to implement these changes across like the entire world. That's a huge jump.
Exactly, and to their credit, they do acknowledge that hurdle. They emphasize the importance of like a phased approach. So starting with these pilot projects and then gradually expanding as the technology develops and gains wider acceptance.
So sort of a like think big, start small kind of philosophy.
Precisely, and they also highlight the importance of global collaboration. Like it's not about JC or Earth, single-handedly changing the world. They really see a need for governments, for organizations, even their proposed AI systems, to all like work together to make this happen.
So it's more about like empowering others to join the movement rather than like imposing their vision on everyone else, which I think is smart.
That's definitely the vibe I'm getting. They're proposing a very like decentralized, collaborative model. Like, share the tools, share the knowledge openly, and then let communities around the world kind of, adapt these ideas to their own unique circumstances.
It's a fascinating approach, but incredibly complex. Like, do they give any concrete examples of how they would actually like facilitate this level of global cooperation? How would they even get that started?
One example that stands out is their proposal for something called a space weather hub. So it would be this global network of sensors and systems that are constantly like analyzing data to monitor and predict space weather events, like those solar flares we were just talking about.
Okay, so kind of like a global weather forecast, but for space, like space weather.
Exactly. And the goal would be to make this information freely accessible to everyone. So imagine, communities being able to actually prepare for and mitigate the potential impact of these events in advance.
It's another great example of how they're thinking about technology, not just as a way to like solve problems, but also as this tool for connecting people and creating a sense of shared responsibility, which I think is really cool.
And they don't stop there. They also talk about like the importance of education. like, creating programs and simulations to actually help people understand these complex topics and how they like directly impact our lives.
Yeah, it sounds like they're not just building a better future, but they're trying to like equip people with with the knowledge to understand it and maintain it, which is, I mean, that's a big part of it too, I guess.
That seems to be like a recurring theme throughout everything we've looked at. It's not just about the end goal; it's about the journey. Yeah, the ongoing process of learning and adapting and evolving together as we go.
It's definitely a refreshing perspective, in a world that's so obsessed with quick fixes and instant gratification. It's it's encouraging to see, some group thinking long term like this.
Absolutely, and maybe that's the most important takeaway from all this, from this whole deep dive. Like
Yeah.
J.J. Earth is really challenging us to embrace complexity, to acknowledge that real progress takes time, it takes collaboration, and a willingness to learn from our mistakes along the way.
For all the like wild kind of out there concepts we've discussed, that message of like collaboration and long term thinking, it really resonates with me, I think.
It's a message that's more relevant than ever, don't you
Yeah.
think? Especially given all the challenges that our world is facing right now, and yet there's this sense of hope embedded in their vision. It's almost like they genuinely believe that we actually have the power to create a better future, as long as we're willing to put in the work and work together to do it.
That's a perfect note to end on, I think. It's been quite a journey from the sands of Australia to the far reaches of space, from AI companions to like reimagined democracies. It's a lot to take in.
And we've only just scratched the surface of these documents.
Yeah.
There are like tons of fascinating details and thought-provoking ideas that we didn't even have time to get to.
I don't know about you, but I'm feeling a mix of like excitement and healthy skepticism, I think. Like it's clear that J.J. Earth is onto something special, even if some of their ideas seem a bit out there.
I completely agree. And ultimately, that's what they're aiming for, isn't it? Like to spark a conversation, to challenge our assumptions, and to invite us to imagine what a truly different future might actually look like.
Yeah.
And I think they've done that.
Yeah. Well, they've certainly accomplished that goal. Thank you for joining me on this incredible deep dive into the world of J.J. Earth. Until next time, keep those imaginations running wild, folks.